What a surprise to wake up to today. Netflix just uploaded Godzilla Minus One. I have been waiting for this movie ever since I saw it in the theater last year, and this is the surprise hit of 2023. I don't think anybody could have foreseen this movie becoming as popular as it has. This was kind of a word of mouth type film where I think they initially meant to just release it for one weekend, but it got such a strong response right out of the gate that they just kept it running. And that's how I heard about it, was just word of mouth. Somebody had seen it and they mentioned it to me, and I was like, okay, all right, I got to check this thing out. So now we can watch it in our homes, and more specifically in our home theaters. And this is great news because not only is it on Netflix, it's on Netflix in 4K and Dolby Atmos. Now, this is a critical thing here. In order to get the Atmos track, you have to make some changes when you start playing the movie. Most likely, if your experience is like mine, it's going to default to the English language track, which, first of all, that's dubbed. So it's in English, but it's a dub job. And me personally, I don't like watching movies dubbed into English. I'm more than happy to read the subtitles and hear it in the language that it was recorded in. So if you do get it and it is playing in English, then you know you're not getting it in Atmos, because Atmos is only available on the Japanese language track. And in order to change that, you have to be playing the movie and then pause it and then go up to the little icon on the far right, right above the scroll bar, and you have to select Japanese. And then after you select Japanese, you'll also need to turn on subtitles. So if you just select Japanese with no subtitles, you won't get any English subtitles. So select the Japanese language track and then go over to the other button next to it and then select English subtitles and then hit play. And then if you adjust your volume, depending on what processor or AVR you're using, if you adjust the volume, it should tell you what sound format it's in. So in the case of my home theater here, I can now see when I adjust the volume that it is in fact in Dolby Atmos. If you get Dolby Surround or anything other than Atmos, and that's what it says, then you know you're not getting the full Atmos track. And I will say that the English track is not, I mean, for sure it's definitely not as good, but it was noticeably not as good. It's more muted. It's just not as dynamic. And so definitely watch it in the Atmos track. Now, the other key critical piece to this is you have to have the highest level of Netflix subscription. So you have to have the full 4K spatial audio option for your Netflix membership. So get all those pieces in place, and then you can experience Godzilla Minus One in Dolby Atmos and 4K. So, as I mentioned, I saw this in the theater, and I have been wanting to experience it here in my home theater. But unfortunately, here in the United States, we don't have a 4K release date yet. I don't think it's even been announced that we're getting it in 4K, let alone a release date. So I was kind of bummed about that. So when I woke up today and I discovered that it's on Netflix, I got really excited because I was super impressed by this movie in the theater, and I have wanted to try it out in my home theater to see how it compares. And jumping right to the chase, I actually enjoyed it more in my home theater. I think it sounded even better than it sounded in the theater. So if you haven't seen the movie, definitely check it out. But if you have, then you know that this is a fairly straightforward movie, and it follows the arc of a disgraced, shamed kamikaze pilot during World War II. And it just follows his arc as he kind of rebuilds his life and ultimately finds redemption in his conquering of Godzilla. And then obviously there's a lot of Godzilla in the middle of all that. And the movie pretty much follows a fairly standard 3-act format. You have the initial introduction of Godzilla to kind of introduce this threat, though you don't see all of his power right up front. And then at the midpoint, there's kind of a beatdown where Godzilla really shows his stuff and really just lets these people know that he is in charge and they are unable to stop him. And then in the third act, they outsmart him and outwit him and ultimately take him down. This is a great movie, and I think it was successful for a number of reasons. First and foremost, it's a good story. It shows the human element of it. It's not just a slasher flick or a smasher flick. It definitely has the human element of this guy as you follow him through the story. And then also, as I mentioned, it's a straightforward story, and there's not a lot of complicating or convoluting factors in this story. You understand what the stakes are, you understand what they're up against, what the threat is, and what the objective is. And I think this movie was successful in many of for the same reasons that a movie like Top Gun Maverick was successful, because it follows a storyline that people can understand and relate to, and they can feel the emotion of it. And on top of all that, this movie, despite its despite its ridiculously low budget, I think it was budgeted at $15 million to make this movie, and they accomplished something that I don't know how they did this for $15 million, but it looks great and it sounds even better. And that's what I'm going to talk about right now, which is, how did this sound in my home theater? And again, I'm watching this on streaming. So as we all know, a physical disc format is superior to streaming because the compression isn't as much and you're just getting more data and more information. Despite that, this movie streaming sounded incredible here in my home theater. Godzilla, his roars and stomping when he takes steps, you feel them. My bass shakers. I recently reviewed an old movie, The Incredible Hulk, and I was being reminded of that movie as I watched Godzilla Minus One, because of how you really feel him as he moves across the landscape or through the ocean. You just feel it. My bass shakers were just shaking my chair, and my subs. There was a few scenes in particular when he first launches out with his radiation breath. Oh my gosh, when that thing exploded, you felt it. My walls were shaking, my house was shaking, my chair was shaking, everything was going crazy. It was intense, and I love that scene because the sound, you felt and heard the explosion, but then there was this the explosion blast, the radiation blast, as it blew past, it just traveled across the room, and then as it receded, it rushed back. It was kind of like a wave crashing in and then rushing out, and it sounded awesome. And in the climax of the movie, there's an airplane. The hero is in an airplane, and he's flying around, and he's kind of antagonizing Godzilla, trying to lure him out into the ocean. And as that airplane is zooming past the screen, you get a lot of overheads, heights as the plane is flying by and across the side, and it was so cool. It really felt like you were there in that space, and the airplane was just cruising by you, and like you could almost reach out and touch it. It just felt so close. And there was another scene earlier in the film when some guys are talking, and a military battleship gets broken in half. You don't see it. It's off camera, and that's the point. It happens off camera, and so you hear it through the sides, and you're like, whoa. And, the characters look over in that direction, and so you're kind of like them in that you hear it, but you don't see it. And so they're talking, and then they hear something off to the side, and so they look, and I found myself kind of pulling in that same direction because the sound came from here. And then the camera cuts to a different angle, and that ship gets thrown by Godzilla, and it just flies across the screen. Sounded incredible, sounded amazing. This movie is so much fun. It's great. It's fun for the whole family. I can't recommend it enough. Go check it out on Netflix. Thanks for watching.